Okay, I'm going to start now with my presentation, talking about the value of having a second citizenship or residency during a time of crisis. So I'm just going to share my screen here, and then we'll go through this, and then we will continue with our question and answer session towards the end. So keep your questions ready, and I will go through this as quickly as I can so that we can continue on with this good dialogue. So, as I mentioned, I'm from Latitude Consultancy. What we do is we focus on two main areas. One is the government advisory. So we work with a variety of governments, helping them either structure, create a brand new program, or revise and adjust their existing program. I'll talk a little bit more about that later as it relates to COVID, because there's been challenges for certain governments, and they need to know how they can readjust them to make them more competitive in this current environment. But the mainstay is also our private client services. So working with clients, understanding their needs, and then making recommendations in terms of which residence and citizenship by investment program would be most suitable for them, again, based on their needs, their budget, and their timescales. So our headquarters is in the Channel Islands in Jersey, and we've got several offices around the world, as you can see. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're very involved with the Investment Migration Council, which is a nonprofit that sets global standards for this industry, touching on matters such as best practices, code of ethics, etc., not only for practitioners, but also for governments and developers. And our office is the Caribbean representative. So we're very proud of having that accolade. Very quickly on our government side, you can see, since 2002, our principals have been involved, from programs in Canada, the UK. We were very involved with the launch of the program in Antigua and Barbuda, and certainly in Malta. Our CEO, Eric Major, was one of the key architects behind that program. And, for myself, I was also very involved with the redesign of Grenada's program. Which led to a complete turnaround of their offering that they have. And very recently, we won a public service concession to start a program from scratch in the British Overseas Territory of Anguilla. And, that's more of a tax residence option as opposed to what we're focusing on. But it's, we're trying to be very active and, on the government side, and can certainly then give you perspective from both sides of the process. So when we look at the motivations of why someone would want to get a second residency or citizenship, certainly the mobility. We look at somewhere like Cyprus, where you're getting a European passport in a relatively quick period of time. Suddenly that opens up the world, in terms of your access for visa-free travel. And if you're coming from certain countries, let's say you're coming from Russia, you're coming from Pakistan, you're coming from Lebanon, you're coming from South Africa, where you don't have these relationships in place, the challenge of always having your passport tied up at a consulate, and not being able to be spontaneous with your travel, things of that nature, this gives a convenience factor that opens up different opportunities. And, there's a whole also cross section, Cyprus being at the top end, but you look at some of the Caribbean programs where the investment starts at 100,000 US, this could be a very attractive solution for many people. Security. Right now, there's a lot of people who are worried about what's happening in the world. And, knowing that if you're a citizen of another country or you've got a residence card, you can get access into that country and benefit from the infrastructure that's in place. For some people, it's a quality of life matter. It's saying I'm living in a place where maybe there's issues on my personal safety, just my personal freedoms, and they want to have a better solution for themselves and their family. Education, we're seeing this a lot more and more from third world countries. A lot of people, look at the US, the UK, Canada as tier one countries as it relates to education. but many of the other countries, have international schools. I know that Andre was talking about the international school in Paphos, for example. So this is something that people will look at, especially if they're going to be spending an amount of time there. For business, this was touched on earlier, but people who are looking to expand their business into different markets, and again, having citizenship status makes it a lot easier than trying to do this as an overseas national, where you're also possibly needing work permits, and you're not going to have the same foothold as opposed to if you were a permanent resident or a citizen. For retirement, some people were looking for the nice climate. They're looking for a peaceful life, and they've done their hard work, and now they want to enjoy the benefits. For us, I know Konstantinos, you made the comment about Limassol and Paphos being sort of mini communities of Russia and the CIS, and there's a familiarity that a lot of people like, and if they know that if they're enjoying the nice Cypriot sunshine, but they can speak in Russian to their neighbor and such like, it just gives them a nice comfort factor. And some jurisdictions tend to attract certain nationalities, and I think Cyprus is a good example, as it's been very popular with the Russian community. Even before the program started, it was still I remember sitting on the beach in Ayia Napa, and all I heard was Russian. I didn't hear anything else, and it's the same, I think, when you go to other parts of Europe. And then also tax planning. There are some programs that focus on the tax. So if people are living in a high tax jurisdiction, they may be looking to lessen their footprint. So thus the main motivations why people would want to move. But then we can break that down further into the three main types. So we have tax, residency, citizenship by investment, and residency by investment. So very quickly on the tax residency, I'm right now sitting in Montreal. Canada is a very high tax jurisdiction. The United Kingdom is a high tax jurisdiction. So people are maybe looking at ways to restructure their portfolio to mitigate some of the taxes. And, especially if people have numerous properties around the world, they may travel frequently, there may be less than 90 days in any one jurisdiction per year, then they may want to look at certain tax residency programs, whether that's Anguilla, whether that's the Cayman Islands, whether it's Jersey. There's a variety out there. Italy has a tax residence program, Singapore has one. And, we find, geography comes into play. So, if you're sitting in Canada, it's easier for you to maybe restructure in somewhere in the Caribbean as opposed to Singapore, whereas someone else in Asia would maybe focus on a Singapore option before they would do in the Caribbean. The citizenship by investment, now this is very, like we were saying, it gives you mobility because it's a direct pathway to citizenship, and the privilege of being a citizen is to apply for a passport. So for many people, the end goal of having that passport is achievable through these programs. With obviously some of the programs, Portugal, Greece, you start off as a resident and then you graduate to citizenship. But for people who have a more time-sensitive need, either the Caribbean programs, the Cypriot program, Montenegro, Malta, there's a lot of options out there for people who want to get that direct pathway for citizenship. And it's important. Maybe I'll talk about this a little bit later on. But if you're an actual citizen of a country, during this pandemic, you can enter that country. They can't turn you away because you're now a citizen. So that sort of extra bit of insurance can come into play. And finally, the residency by investment. And this is, I guess you can almost branch this into two. We look at Portugal and Greece where there's minimal day count requirements. But then you've got other programs, which people actually want to live there full time. So they might be wanting to move to the US, to Canada, to Australia, to New Zealand, to UK. So they're looking at a bigger picture to actually relocate their whole family, whereas others which is where Portugal and Greece has been very popular, are looking to have that residency card, do the minimum day count, and then have access to travel around the region. And eventually, as I think as my father said, some will, some won't, actually decide to upgrade to citizenship and are quite happy to maintain their status as a resident. So I think it's always important that we break it down and understand those are the three sort of main segments as it relates to this industry. So we look at the current situation in the world with COVID. We're all very aware of it, and I hope nobody has been directly impacted. And I think we're all seeing that our life has changed, and so as a consequence of that, people are exploring what are my options so I'm better prepared in case something like this happens again. And if you believe the news, we're not out of the situation yet. There's still going to be some challenges, whether it's a new virus, whether it's another strain, whether it's another spike, we don't know yet. So when people are looking at, why would I do this? It's a lot of money, it's a lot of commitment. Do I really need it? What we're finding as a firm is that this has been a reality check. People think about, what if, and then that what if, unfortunately, is our reality. That's right now, right? And so the people who had planned and have their status, they have their property, they've got more options than those who didn't. We're seeing a lot of people that we spoke to over the last 12 or 18 months are now calling us back saying, hey, I wish I had done it then. I need to do it now because I'm not comfortable with how things are looking in the future. So I touched on the mobility piece earlier. So let's say, I had applied and I had gotten my citizenship. I can then fly, if I wanted to then fly to Cyprus or to Montenegro, and I say, look, I'm going to sit it out here. Everyone's in lockdown the next 3 months. I would rather be in lockdown in Cyprus or in Montenegro or in the Cayman Islands or in Antigua, because it's going to be controlled much better than where I am currently. And this is something that we've been hearing from a lot of people. We look at, the UK, the US is unfortunately turning into a real problem. We're seeing Brazil, we're seeing these places. So, if I'm sitting in Sao Paulo and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, healthcare is being overrun, the virus is everywhere. I kind of wish I was sitting in Sintra or Cascais, that side of Lisbon, and having security for my family, having access to healthcare if I need it, and basically waiting until things settle down in Brazil before returning back. So it's that ability to be mobile, to have access to another jurisdiction, and access to healthcare. If you were, and I'll use the same example, if you were a Brazilian and you didn't have your status, then Portugal wouldn't let you in. But now that you have status, you're able to get entrance and access to all of that. And let's not let's not underestimate the value of the healthcare. If you're a person, say, from a third world country, and you're wealthy and you're used to having your medical care done in Switzerland or done in the United Kingdom, you don't have that option because you don't have the status to enter those countries. So you're now subject to the healthcare systems in your home country, which may not be that good. But if you had, your status somewhere else, then you could at least enter that jurisdiction and know that that healthcare system is available to you. Okay, so that's where, we're finding the healthcare conversation is becoming much more important for people when they're looking at a jurisdiction. And then, just the peace of mind, and the insurance, no one can predict the future. 6 months ago, no one would have predicted would be where we are. And so it's always that knowledge that I've got it in my back pocket if I need it. Hopefully I don't, but there's such a degree of uncertainty now in the world that people want to make sure that they've got that plan B, that insurance policy for themselves and their family. And this is what we're seeing, is many people are looking at these programs as a way to support their existing portfolio that they would have. And the other thing I think is important to reference here is, as a response to COVID, a lot of programs have made have provided incentives or put out a stimulus program. In the Caribbean, for example, there's been reductions in levels of investment. We've seen that in St. Lucia. We've seen an expansion in the definition of a dependent. So, a greater amount of people within the same family can be included for the same level of investment. to the point this is now including siblings. So if you have a brother or a sister who are unmarried and have no children, you can then also, in some cases, include them. And so for that reason, more people are taking advantage of it. And, you know, we spoke earlier about what the different governments are doing to receive applications. You know, we're seeing that they're allowing electronic documentation or electronic files to be submitted, whereas a hard copy would usually have been provided. So this allows them to at least initiate due diligence processes and do their own reviews to get the application to a certain point, but they would still require the hard copy to finalize the application as part of their processes. And so it's allowing them not to slow down, and they don't want to build up a backlog or a delay in the turnaround times. You know, we spoke earlier about, you know, the predictability of how long is a file going to take to process is very important when people are looking at these programs as well. So when we're looking at, you know, where do I want to apply, that's another consideration you need to have. The other aspect is right now, a lot of people are applying, so we're expecting there'll be a spike of submissions in the next few months. So if you're actually thinking about this, now is a good time to get your application in before there's an increase in volume, which could then lead to a delay in the processing times. So these are some of the areas that, you know, when we're counseling people and saying, you know, how do I, you know, why do I need this and how do I deal with it? This is the feedback that we're getting in terms of why they now want to consider having a second citizenship or residency. And they're also understanding the value, you know, that when bad things happen, like we're experiencing now, that they've actually done their homework and they have a plan in place to be able to protect themselves and their families. So that's my point of view in terms of how, you know, why people would do this. And I know we're going to talk more about question and answers, but I'm just giving you my contact details on the slide here, and I'm certainly available to talk about, you know, these types of options.